Hey guys, it's Joe and Justin with Tuning Tuesday, episode 40. Almost, I guess 3/4 of a year we've been doing this.
Yeah.
40 and 52, we're getting close.
You and Alex started it out.
Yeah.
And gosh, I mean the last 20 episodes, you and I or so.
Something like that, yeah. It's
the
crazy.
Halfway point together.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a special guest on the show behind the computer. Rebecca reading questions today.
I've been called special before.
Since Carrie is out on vacation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep, so I'm here. I'm going to try to keep up with the comments the best I can, but I don't have Carrie's expertise in this, so bear with me. Ask again if I don't answer, or if I don't ask.
To hammer the keyboard.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't make any mad faces. No mad emojis.
Exactly, and if you could, like, share, and subscribe, try and get it out there. If any of your friends have any questions or anything like that, make sure to tag them. I guess we'll get started with Cobra Gen 3 stuff. We're seeing a bit more funnel through of people out in the wild testing them.
I mean, I think we've had 2 or 3 dyno results just in the past week alone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know how many are shipped.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a lot of people like taking their time getting their cars together this time of year.
Yeah.
But we're finally seeing some results come in, so that's cool.
And you got to thank most Cobra guys, if they're at the level of putting Gen 3 on their car and doing it properly, most of those guys are doing full builds anyways.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're looking at, so what would be, to you, what's a full build?
A built-er short block than the stock short block, preferably something like a Texit or an 05 up WAP block. A set of cams, if they're running race gas or E85, which in my opinion you should be, run more compression and some cooling system modifications, supporting fuel mods, stuff like that.
So you've got the engine side of things, like you were saying. A lot of people go to the aluminum block on the 03 Cobras, and of course all the Coyote stuff is aluminum block to begin with, so to relate it to that modern era. And it's funny because like Coyote and 03 Cobra use the same rod. Yeah. Same rod specs. You can use a manly H-beam. The 03 Cobra comes with a manly H-beam from the factory. And then some people say stock displacement. Some go bigger. Upgraded camshafts, always a plus. And then all the componentry to feed it. Fuel system, a good blower. And you're there, except for
ported heads by Chris Starnes or some of the other reputable guys out there.
Ported heads.
But yeah, just a good set of cams too. Based on what I've seen, based on like Cobra stuff, it doesn't seem like they do too terribly well on like Comp 106 360s with a PD blower. They seem to perform significantly better with a custom cam from guys like Kurgan or from Todd Warren or L&M than they do with the off-the-shelf comp grinds.
That's a good point. Yeah. Do you have any questions coming in, Rebecca?
A few questions coming in. Somebody wants to know about 18 stuff. They asked about Gen 3, so you guys want to...
We are supporting Roush on the 18. We've installed several of them. We're tuning them as well. So that's pretty much it right now. The hood clearance on the 18 is a big pain in the butt. So there's just not a whole lot of space there. We're kind of looking at more as to what the long-range plan is going to be from Ford as far as how long we're going to have this car, and then what the GT500 is going to do, and integrate our Gen 3 into that line when we have the big picture there.
Make sure this isn't like a 2-year thing, like one of those weird transitional 94, 95, SN95 things.
Yeah, I mean, Ford has put an engine in a car for as little as 2 years before.
Yeah.
And then changed everything on everybody again.
Keegan Daly was asking about our heat exchanger on a 99 to 04 GT. Wanted to know if it would be possible to put it on, and if so, how difficult it would be. He's got a buddy that's got a Kenny Bell and wants to upgrade some.
And for point of reference, Keegan was the red S550 with Gen 3.
Oh, okay, cool. So he's
but
got first-hand experience.
Our heat exchanger will work on a new edge. It just requires, as you kind of surmised, a little bit of fabrication. you have to cut the area between the two frame rails bumper support out. So like you have frame rail, 4-bolt flange or 3-bolt flange, and 4-bolt flange or 3-bolt flange. And you take the middle section of that out, and then you kind of make the brackets work in that region.
You basically do a bumper support delete.
Exactly.
Now, I did recently see this, and I had the guy send me pictures, and his car is actually outside because he starts work here next week.
Oh, nice.
He got our heat exchanger to mount, flipped around with a bumper, with a crash bar in place. However, he's got the 0304 Cobra bumper, which is just a little broader and comes out more
flat-faced.
Yeah, and he did have to do some minor plastic trimming.
Okay.
So, you know, given the choice of messing with plastics and stuff like that, most race car people are going to do the bumper delete anyways.
So if he flipped the heat exchanger around, the fans would be on the front side, or did he remount the fans? Because you'd have to change the fans from puller to pusher.
I don't. You know what?
I don't think you can do that.
I don't. I think he kept it the same direction.
We'll have to look into that more.
We'll
but
look at it.
It's possible. I know that didn't Aiken do that back in the day, or did he do a GT500 heat exchanger?
I think he did it. I think he did it too. He may have done a 500 one, and then another one of our customers with the Cobra with the Whipple 3.4 had a VMP on there, but he got rid of the crash bar, the bumper / crash bar deal.
Yeah, so basically just plan on removing the crash bar, and we know that more than one person has done it, so it's got to be pretty simple.
To get rid of the crash bar.
Yeah.
I got more questions. Carrie's here too. She's saying hi. And
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, Carrie.
Yep. Bennett Funk has a question for you, Justin. He's doing a Turbo 400 in his car. It's a 12 GT500, and it's got a Gen 2R on it. He's making $685, and he's got a 10% lower and IV 1050s. He wants to know what converter you would suggest.
Well, so Rebecca actually has her old converter that's being refreshed and could be stalled specifically for your car, and it would be a very, very good deal because we're not using it anymore. It's a Pro Torque, one of Pro Torque's steel weld together converters. Really nice part, has served her well for a season. We could make you a deal on that. Message Rebecca.
Yep.
But
hit me up. It's a good converter.
In general. You know, a 9-inch or a 10-inch. We've been working with FTI a lot. They've got some bolt together stuff. Gets a little pricey. Just depends on your budget and your goals. I mean, 685 wheel horsepower Gen 2R car with a Turbo 400. You probably doesn't need to be real loose because the thing makes torque. You're probably going to street drive it. So, you know, you could probably spend $1,000 to $1,500 on a converter and get yourself something pretty good. You know, just kind of what the market like that is.
And then Poor Boy 313 is asking about our trade-ins. He wants to know if we will be offering any pre-used VMP Supercharger kits.
We do have some refurbished 11 to 14 kits we're putting together that utilize those trade-in head units after we've inspected them and stuff. Availability is very, very limited. The discount, I'm going to be honest, is not huge. It's about $300 to $400. Contact our sales and support team. Of course, anything we sell is still going to come with some type of warranty. It's just going to be limited to like 90 days on those used head units, refurbished head units. But it's definitely an option.
Ryan Reeve is saying, Joe, he sees that you have his can of BOOSTane and he's looking forward to September 25th and he's going to win 6 more cans.
Hell yeah.
Sweet.
And James and Johnny Manus is asking about when intake results will be released.
I want to say that's coming out the pipe soon.
Yes, that video is, the video and the story are almost done. Yeah.
Dale Edinger is asking about any idea when the pulleys will be for pre-sale on the 18 Roush Supercharger.
Those will probably be for pre-sale in the next couple of weeks. We're just making sure that it's we're far enough along in the stream that we feel comfortable pre-saling them. So
Marcus Jennings has a 07 GT500, and it's got the Ford Racing TVS, long tubes, R 67mm throttle body, JLT 127, 10% lower, 2.6 upper. What will I need to fuel system? Can I just do pumps, or do I need a full fuel system? He wants to know.
So,
is he wanting to do E85 on that setup?
Yeah, did he say anything about E85?
He doesn't. So Marcus, if you can kind of fill us back in.
So let's maybe give them both options for GT500s.
So for GT500s on a setup like that, 2.6 and a 10%, you can get away with stock fuel pumps and a booster if you're on a gasoline-based fuel. If you are...
And I say get away with it. I mean, it's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Justin said, it's not bad. If you're wanting to do E85 though, that's absolutely not acceptable. You'd have to do a return fuel system, minimum twin pump. May want to think about a triple pump setup just for a little room to grow, like the 4 Innovations dual pump setup with a minimum of 465s, 2 of them. If you want to spring for a third to get yourself a little headroom down the road for 1,000+ horsepower in E85, that's always a good idea.
Robert Wyden is going back to the heat exchangers and is wondering what are the average temperature drops that are seen with the triple pass on a GT500.
I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a temperature drop. It's the biggest thing to think of a heat exchanger as is an extra volume with which to store energy and a means by which to pull energy away quickly compared with what a stock heat exchanger can do.
Yeah, I mean the recovery time, limiting heat soak, improving recovery time, that's all what the bigger heat exchanger is about. I will say, once in a great while, we'll get a car on the dyno with like a TVS at like 16 or 18 pounds, and it's still got the freaking stock heat exchanger in there. And in the case of 07 to 10, stock heat exchanger is about this wide, it's about this tall, and it's an inch thick. And
it's just a little bit bigger than an 03 or 4 Cobra heat exchanger or a Lightning heat exchanger.
In 11 and 12, they actually doubled the thickness of the heat exchanger, so it's a little bit better.
And then 13, 14, it got even bigger, taller.
Yeah, it got big. 13, 14, it got decent, finally. But where I was going with this is that these cars with the stock blower, you can see them heat soak even in one dyno. No, I'm sorry, with an upgraded blower, you can see them heat soak even in one dyno pull. So that won't happen. I mean, I'll see 150 downstreams after a pull on a warm car if there's no heat exchanger upgrade. So maybe we could define it in terms of boost levels for people. You know, stock blower, 12, 13 pounds. It's going to improve performance, but it's not critical. But as soon as you start to go above 14, 15 pounds, I would say it's critical. Yeah,
especially in terms of recovery time. Like if you're playing around in Mexico, your recovery time is pretty significantly diminished if you do any type of pull over, talk about who's going to race who, and the whole time your car's just sitting there baking in its own heat, and you go back out onto the road and you're 150 downstreams, and it's like all that trash you just talked to that other guy, it's kind of going out the window as your car's sitting there baking in its own heat.
Pretty much.
Bennett is back asking about what stall on the Turbo 400.
I would say for a 5.4 motor, I mean, depending on like if you're gonna do
gearing, tire size.
Yeah, I mean 3,000 to 4,000 is a good stall for any mod motor, like good middle of the road, street strip type deal.
And I'd say with a GT500, with how they make peak torque and their RPM window is smaller compared to a 5-liter, you may want to be closer to that 3,000 mark than that 4,000 mark.
Yeah. I actually, once upon a time, I had a GT500 with about a 6,000 stall.
Was that the TCI 6X?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yes. And Rebecca's old converter, we'll have it stalled to whatever you want it to be, or whatever's best for the combo.
Dorian wants to know if we have any updates on 10R80 converters, rumors, release dates, anything you got, he wants to know.
We've been kind of talking about that. I mean, the people want to buy them and they want to spend money on them. What's your thought on 10R80 converters?
It's got such a short first gear that unless you're launching in second, I don't know that it's necessary.
So from drag racing, this is what we know about converters. You get higher in the power band on launch, so you launch harder. And in some of the stuff where you're really trying to go a lot faster, the drop in RPM between gears is also an effect of the converter and a potential performance improvement area. 10R80 has a ton of first gear.
Yep.
And the gears are very closely spaced.
Yep. You're basically operating a CVT. I mean, not literally, obviously, but from an RPM drop standpoint and from a starting line ratio standpoint, it's hard to beat that 10R80, and I don't know. I mean, the biggest advantage to me of an aftermarket converter and a 10R80 is holding capacity. But that's, I don't know. Without seeing the data of what it actually changes in first gear, second gear, and stuff like that, I don't think there's, other than holding power, not much advantage.
I mean, we know people have gone 8s on a stock converter. Rebecca went 8s on a stock converter. Hasty went 8s on a stock converter. 6R80 stuff. And just from history, because there's been a lot more runtime on the 6R80 stuff. So, like, you know, the torque converter will it hold up to that abuse for forever? Probably not, but for as
It'll
many
at least
runs
do
as
it a
we
while.
Yeah, so like, you know, the durability aspect is there. There's some durability. And, yeah, like, I mean, I would probably spend money on other parts of the car.
I'd argue that the more gears you have, the less difference a converter makes. The less gears you have, the more difference it makes.
Yeah.
Like cars on glides or cars on turbo 400s, the properly sized converter can make a huge difference on those.
Yeah, they live and die by the converter. And like
because they have such tall gearing in the trans.
You know, and we were talking about the gear ratio and stuff on the 6R80. We're at the power levels that we're at. We're trying to take gear ratio out of them, so they spend more time in the gear and put down more power.
Going back to heat exchanger stuff again, Beards and Cars says, hey guys, it's 100-degree weather where I live, and my IATs are running 158 idling in the parking lot and 130 to 142 driving. Should I be worried? It's a 15 GT with a Kenny Bell and 48-pound injectors, booster pump, long tubes, and running about 10 pounds of boost, looks like.
I would say that those IATs aren't to the point where I'd worry about it.
They're always going to be higher at idle.
Exactly that, and it's, if you're 150 at idle, that doesn't matter too much. If you're 180 at cruising speed and 200 at the top of a pole, then I'd say it's worth looking into and seeing if there's any room for significant improvement. But if you're cruising down the road and they're 130 and it's 100 degrees ambient, I'd say that's within the ballpark of normal for a PD blower. Nothing really outside the realm of reason.
Josh Hubble says hi, and Slowpoke says that he's got a VMP elbow to replace the stock elbow on the Roush setup. When changing it, will I have to have it retuned, or is it just bolt on and drive? He's got our tune, and it's a 13 auto. With
a 13 auto on our Cal, if you're just bolting on a supercharger elbow, don't worry about getting a tune update. The MAF spark and everything else is all scaled high enough to account for that.
Yeah, Peter will pick up the extra airflow. The tune is good with it. You can port match it for a little better performance to get it matching the supercharger opening. But you can also
make sure you capture all those shavings.
Yeah.
Or at least 99% of them.
Yeah.
Robert Munoz is requesting that we tune an 0304 Cobra with HP tuners and report back how you like it. With any insight?
Played around with it.
How we like it. I mean, it's another tool. We use all the tools.
Every single one of them. I don't anticipate it being any worse than the current stuff is. I mean, at the end of the day, if I can get the car tuned, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of this is like everything's in our heads. It's just a matter of how it gets there.
John F. says, hi, Joe and Justin. His car is running amazing. Thank you for the solid support. He's not tried BOOSTane yet, but he has a case in the garage. How long can he keep it unopened? He's not going to have a chance to use it in the next year. Or till next year, sorry.
I'd imagine that as long as it's sealed and in its case, shelf life shouldn't really be an issue within reason.
Most race fuels, like they actually say like 2 years. Because the thing with race fuel and additives like BOOSTane, there's not a lot of chemicals in there. So they're pretty stable. Unlike gasoline, which has pump gasoline has a bazillion chemicals trying to do different things.
That, and it's sealed in a metal container.
Yeah.
So you can't really get anything evaporating out of solution.
Yeah.
Daniel Lopez wants to know, will a fuel monitor that has not been set or is not okay have a negative impact on performance for a flex fuel tune S550 GT? Can it cause engine damage?
A fuel monitor not setting as ready should not cause an issue from a performance standpoint.
R4 says it's a 12 GT500 and the belt is rubbing on the idler pulley that has an outer lip. Tried adjusting the belt a million times with no luck. The belt shreds the outer part every 500 to 1,000 miles. Any suggestions?
Remove the pulley with the lip, unless he's talking about the factory pulley with a lip.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's talking about the factory pulley with the lip that's after the blower.
Mm-hmm. The one in between the crank and the blower.
Yeah.
It's like right behind the water pump region.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it has a lip on it.
I want to say it's lipped.
I mean, it would really depend on what blower and stuff. You know, there's some minor ways to tweak belt alignment on a GT500. This is kind of ghetto, but you can take the dowels out of the blower and it'll go back about 20 or 30 thousandths of an inch.
Mm-hmm.
The alignment dowels, there's a little bit of slop in the bolt holes. I mean, you shouldn't have to do that stuff, but if you feel like that's an issue,
You can try it.
yeah.
Eli Scott Klein wants to know, what's the best bias ply for a higher horsepower manual car, an MT drag or a Hoosier drag? Not worried about longevity, just looking for the stickiest tire.
The only thing I've had experience with high horsepower manual is like 1 or 2 cars that I've personally had a hand in it going down the track. And based on everything else I've been told about high horsepower manuals, it's a stiff wall bias ply slick that Mickey Thompson makes. It's like a 3000157 part number or something like that. If you want an exact part number, just email me or email sales and I can get that part number for you.
And he goes on also to ask, what's our opinion on getting axle tubes welded on a dig car?
On a dig car, I would.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll have a really bad time when your axle tube spins and your control arm pulls it forward into the wheel well and tears up your wheel well and your tire.
Does all kinds of bad shit.
It spins your brake line off. You'll have a really bad time.
Dirty D says, spark plug heat range. At what point do you drop 1 heat range, 2 heat ranges? Is it a horsepower range, boost range? Does E85's cooling effect make a difference with plugs in heat range?
E85's cooling effect does make a little bit of difference, but another thing you have to keep an eye on with E85 is its intolerance to pre-ignition that can be induced by a plug that's too hot. But I'd say the bigger factor in plug heat ranges is power added to the engine. So, or how much more cylinder pressure you're creating or how much more heat you're generating. I'd say 1 heat range within every 150, 100 horsepower, drop a heat range. Sound about right for a rule of thumb for you? We kind of have already, we have everything already kind of laid out, and it's not based on how much power you're adding. We base it off the setup since we do such a finite
type of combinations.
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
Yeah, we kind of have X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and this is the recipe for each.
Put that in like brisk part plugs that we carry, like an RR12 YS, and then you can go to an RR12S, which is a non-projected tip, and then there's an RR10, I think has an S suffix too, that is for like super cold 1,000 horsepower stuff.
Yeah, and that'd all be 5 liter, and then GT500's GR.
Michael Webb says that he's got a 17 GT with a Roush blower, and he's on E85 with cat delete. I think he probably means PMS because he just wrote PMS. So I don't think his car has PMS. And he is planning to upgrade to the Gen 3. He wants to know if he's going to need a retune.
Yeah, we're going to at least need to look at a data log of that setup, and depending on what pulley you go with, you're going to need a retune.
So that's a really common question. Maybe we could give them a little foresight into what's going on here. So the Gen 3 is more efficient. The boost curve's a little bit different. Boost for boost, though, the tune's going to be pretty similar.
Yeah.
However, you make major mods. Let's look at a data log, see if there's any tweaks left.
Exactly that. And if you go same pulley, you're going to add 3 to 4 pounds of boost. We really need to make sure that tune's going to be good.
Yeah, we need to look at if you're adding that much boost on a street car, you're probably on E85. We need to make sure there's still enough fuel there.
He's on E85, this specific guy,
Okay.
so definitely want to make sure there's enough fuel on deck.
What are the most common pulley combos you're seeing with Gen 3?
Right now, 85.
Okay, so 85. They've got the octane. They're going a little aggressive with the 85.
Yeah, like most of the guys that I see running it right now, at least the ones that we're tuning, are 85 millimeter pulley, like E85. We haven't had too many guys feeling froggy enough to go down to like 75, 72 on Gen 3.
Okay.
So they're just kind of tip of the iceberg with Gen 3.
Ooh, so 75, 72.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know of a couple cars that made 800-900 wheel with that at another shop with another tuner.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, Rebecca's looking at me, so I think we got more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Stoker is asking, what is the horsepower limits for the Trinity? Also, is it a normal around 5,800 RPM to have the air-fuel ratio dumped to 10.0 from 11.6? And that's with our tune.
Cap protection. That's not just our tune, that's Ford's calibration. So, like, at 5,800, depending on the conditions prior to you being at 5,800 RPM, let's say you're watt for a duration of
5 to 8 seconds.
5 to 8 seconds, it's going to, it's not convert, it's going to transition into cap protection fueling, which makes it go rich.
How hot the cat is, and then it's adding fuel to cool the cat off. And it will, if you continue to stay watt, it could decide that the cat was cool enough and go back to a leaner air fuel and then oscillate between
the two
and leaner. So Trinity, he's got a GT500. That's a great question because we're getting a lot of Trinity trade-ins on Gen 3s. It seems like it's a popular upgrade for people, whether they have a 1314 or an 0712. That blower, best factory blower Ford's ever made, comparable to our Gen 2 and our Gen 2R stuff. Power limit wise, I mean,
I'd say if you're built motor cammed high compression E85, 1,000's not out of the question on that blower. Similar to what Gen 2 is capable of. But for run-of-the-mill guy on 93, I don't think you're ever really going to get past that. We'll call it with cams on 93. You're never really going to get past that 830, 850 mark.
Right.
On 93.
And that's assuming you've ported the Trinity. There's a lot of welding when people port them to take bumps out.
Updated elbows, like I know Powered by the Hour has one, BPS has one.
I mean, you can easily dump $1,000 to $1,200 into a Trinity blower, modifying it to get more out of it.
And then throttle body on top of that.
What I'm seeing a lot of is Trinities on 07 or 12 GT500s. So maybe let's say that he just slapped one on there, and I see anywhere from low 600s, like if they kept the stock pulley on and they've just got like a CJ65, like 630 with a mild tune on a 2.6 upper pulley. 680, 700 wheel on the 5.4 if you really tweak things.
If I recall correctly, this is Josh Stoker. He's like a stage 4 kit on the ARL5.
Stage 4 kit. Okay, so he's got a 1314.
Yeah.
So those setups, that's basically 700, sometimes 730, 750 with a race gas. We did do some really E85, really 10% lower in 2.4, E85 stuff, 800 wheel. That's how Grant's car was beforehand.
Yep, and then the only way to really surpass that's with aftermarket camshafts, which will help your 93 numbers as well, but then your $1,500, $2,500, depending on whether or not you're installing it yourself, into cams to get that blower to seem to perform better.
So it really depends on where you are in the mod cycle. And most people are asking this question because they're thinking about upgrading. So depends on what options you have or what options are left for you to do.
And you kind of hit on Douglas Gonzalez's question with talking about the Trinity blowers and us taking them them in on trade-in. He's got a 14 GT500, and he was wondering if we were taking in the Trinity blowers also. So you already got that for him. And then Marcus Jennings is following up. He wants to know what power numbers should he see out of the setup with pump gas or E85. Do you guys remember his setup? Because if not, I'm grabbing it right now.
Is he the Gen 2
500 with the with the Ford Racing TVS
and the 2.6 and 10%? And
yep.
Okay. Exactly. So he's asking power numbers on what fuel? E85 or
E85 and pump gas. He'd like to know both, please.
It depends on whether it's the Trinity TVS or the Gen 1 TVS from Ford Racing, because he said he had a Ford Racing TVS.
So let's say it's the original Ford Racing TVS. You know, 2.6 and 10% actually ran my car like that for quite a while, and it'd make 680 with an average size throttle body with off-road exhaust, and then, you know, E85 add 30, 40, maybe 50 wheel at that level. So
if it's Trinity, then maybe call the starting point 700 wheel.
Yeah, add 20 or 30 for the better blower there.
And then E85 really depends on how aggressive your tuner's willing to get with it and how happy the car is. But on that pulley combo, I'd say probably 760, 770.
And that's like, that's
with a good throttle body.
Ideal situation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's if we were tuning the car and Joe and I was being pretty aggressive and the air conditions weren't great and we were on a dyno SAE.
Yeah.
As you know, every once in a while we get some oddball dyno numbers.
Yep.
One reference real quick, Rebecca. We have a video and a story coming out on a 1314 GT500 that we went from the Trinity, basically a stage 4 kit, up to a Gen 3. And it ended up making 799 wheel.
And that was Jason's car?
Yes, Jason's car, yeah.
Dorian's got a follow-up question. Any data or opinions or internet rumors on the extreme DI pumps for 18s? He's wondering specifically about gains, tunings, pluses, minuses.
Has Uwe released that pump yet? I know that Lund was working on some data for one. I guess we got to kind of touch base with him and see what the deal is, because I don't know what exactly we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's a big confidentiality thing, but I'll say his product works, right? Yeah, based on all the testing I've done, the XDI pump works and it works well. Yeah. What you stand to gain on your setup is highly dependent on what you're currently limited by. Yeah.
Joe, you're getting a lot of like for your beard growing prowess.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
You've evolved in your final form, Mountain Man, and
exactly
is comparing your likeness to Santa's. So.
I just shaved last night.
You look good.
Justin always shaves. Justin's beard game's very small. I think.
I don't do any beard game.
No. Is Rebecca the reason you don't do beard game, or would you do it?
No opinion.
Okay.
I just don't care for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get past that stage where it's like a ½ inch long, because then it starts like turning into itself and trying to kill you.
Trying to kill you.
Death by beard.
Yeah, it drives you crazy with itching. Once you get past that, it's not bad.
Nick Matthews wants to know what our take is on valve cover breathers from valvecoverbreathers.com.
Are you familiar with valvecoverbreathers.com?
That's Hector's deal.
Oh, okay. I thought that was just all sold through CFM. I didn't realize that was like a separate thing. It's
Hector at CFM. Good buddy of ours, runs that company, makes those parts. He's explained all the logic to me. It makes sense to me. I know we've tuned cars with them. They don't cause any tuning problems. You know, the logic is it helps relieve excess crankcase pressure. Which you always want to do when you can. Yeah. But I like the way that it works, that it has the check ball, and it only really does it when you have positive crankcase pressure above a set point. Right. So then you're not running around with vacuum leaks at idle part throttle where all your drivability stuff's going on. Right.
Andrew Vincent is asking about 60-foot times. He's got a 16 GT. It's got a 6R80 in it. He's got an 18 intake manifold with cold air. He's got drag springs, shocks, and a tire. He's tired of getting 1.9 60 foots. He's running 12.1 to 12-second quarter-mile times. He wants some help.
Well, we've got another converter in the shop that would be great for you. I mean, especially in the summer heat, that's all converter really on on that car. The problem is, and sorry Joe, I'm kind of just like talking here.
Feel free.
Is the stock converter is really tight. With a blower, with a positive displacement blower like a VMP or a Roush, you make a lot of torque and you loosen up the converter and you get more into the power band. Like we went through all this with Rebecca's car. But naturally aspirated, and we love the 18 intake manifold, by the way, but you do lose like 10 or 15 foot-pounds of torque down low. So you're probably stalling at 2,000, 2,100 RPM. And yeah, the 6R80's got great first gear ratios, but
they're not that great to where they can really propel a car forward quickly that's making, what, 280 pound-feet in that region?
You just need a looser torque converter or more power in the form of nitrous blower or turbo.
Need that starting line advantage.
Yeah. Beards and Cars came back with a follow-up question. With the higher IATs, 130 to 142, at what point is the car robbing timing and performance?
It depends on how your calibration's set up by whoever's tuning it. I'd say that just natively, air temp wise, the lower your temp is, the better your power is going to be. So at any point during you driving the car, the higher your IAT is, the less power you're going to make. But it can be magnified by what your tuner's doing in the ACT retard function or the IAT retard function, whether you're talking SCT or HP. But at the end of the day, that's all determined by your tuner. So you would have to ask your tuner, hey, at what point are you beginning to pull timing? Are you adding timing below a set point, like below 100 degrees? Are you adding in timing via the ACT function, or is it flat below there? I mean, you can kind of get lost in the woods, and what really matters at the end of the day is just keeping the IAT down. Knowing at which point you start to lose it doesn't change the fact of whether or not you're going to get on it. Like, you're not going to look at your IATs in the dash and be like, oh, look, I'm at 130. I'm not going to race this guy now. I mean, maybe if you got to 170, you might get to that point. But I guess at the end of the day, worry about it to a point. Don't let it get in your head and mess you up.
I mean, like, we start pulling timing around, what, like 120, 130?
Yeah, right in that region is where we'll start pulling it.
Like, on the dyno, we get it as cool as possible for dyno numbers. I mean, okay, let's take an extreme abuse situation. Open track, 150, 160, tolerable with a good cooling system. You'll sit there for a while. You start to get 170, 180. Open track, this is constant duty cycle, 100% duty cycle. Your 170, 180, you're on the downward spiral.
Yep.
Andrew Johnson is asking Justin about the 3500 math that you sent him in the JLT 110 housing. What is the approximate horsepower level that the sensor would be good till?
On Rick's car, that was around 900, 910 counts, if I recall correctly, and the sensor goes all the way up to 1023, and it's not a linear curve. It's a 6-order polynomial, so you're going, you know, it's a curve shape like a ski slope.
It's not a linear function.
Yeah, so but what we're trying to say here is there's several hundred horsepower between 900 and 1,000 counts. So generally, we'd say about 20 or 30% more than that stock sensor that you were running before. Should give you plenty of range. I have a transfer function I can send your tuner, Lydio, too, that just out of Rick's car.
Ken Ingram is reusing a question that he had on Burnout Box. When changing from the 93 tune to an E85 tune, does it change the emissions as far as passing?
It depends. Are you talking about a sniffer test, or are you talking about a plug-in emissions test? If you're talking about an F-150 that's changing from 93 to E85, it shouldn't matter from an emission standpoint, because a plug-in emissions test is there to test monitors, not to test actual emissions at the tailpipe. So
theoretically, those monitors affect actual emissions at the tailpipe, but
exactly.
You know.
So I guess to more directly answer your question, it shouldn't affect whether or not you pass an emissions test, but that's dependent on whether or not it's a tailpipe sniffer test or a plug-in emissions test, just checking for monitors.
Marcus Jennings has another follow-up question. He wants to know, what's the best handheld to tune with, and would we be comfortable remote tuning the setup that he has on his GT500?
Marcus Jennings, I think.
I want to say he was a 2.6 10% Gen 1 TVS.
Yeah, Joe.
We've tuned, Joe and I have actually been counting the number of tunes we do.
Yeah,
and,
it's a new thing for us.
Because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And, we've tuned thousands of GT500s at this point, many of them configured the way that yours is. Basically, something like that, SCTX4 is going to be the easiest. There's some BDX, RevX, BDX that has some cloud functionality. If you don't have a PC at home, we can use that. Had somebody that wish he had a RevX right now because he's got a Mac and he can't even data log for me. So
that sucks. I'm doing cloud data logging with a couple people right now and doing cloud tuning. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's very weird.
Send it to the cloud.
Exactly.
Now we also are using the HP Tuners
MPVI 2 or a setup like that. We could do Engage. It'd just be preferred that we do X4 in that specific setup.
Yeah. Yes, we work with HP Tuners, but they don't have like their cloud functionality cell phone app finished yet. Once they do, it'd be best of both worlds.
Beards and Cars came back with, can I run BOOSTane without any tuning issues or a retune?
Sure. But we do. I had a customer tell me this yesterday. Oh, I always put Torco in the tank. I'm like, well, why don't you just tell me? I'll make your tune a little more aggressive. Because 93 tune, keeping it really conservative and safe. You know, a lot of boost, keeping it safe, and yeah, but I'm not getting enough power out of it. Well, the solution is already present. You just need to tell me to turn the knobs a little more.
Yep.
So
you're already putting the Torco in there. We got a solution to that problem.
Please tell your tuner what you're doing.
Yep.
Dirty D wants to know a definition for heat soak. Is it a specific temperature, 140, 150, 160?
I wouldn't say that it's a specific temperature. It's just the point at which you've stored enough energy into your fluid that it takes a significant amount of time or effort to get it out.
You're getting all analytical on this, Joe.
Well, at the end of the day, it's energy and the capacity to store it.
It's a really hard question, so you answered it really quick.
Yeah, I mean, if your coolant temp's over 212 and it's not coming down quickly, I'd say that's heat soaked. If your IAT2 is over 160 and it's not coming down quickly, then I'd say that's heat soaked. But there's not like, people look for absolutes and there's not really absolutes in this.
Yeah, and that's the truth. And I mean, that's a good point. Like, you get one of those stock heat exchanger cars, you know, you get that thing up there at 160.
It takes 30, 45 minutes to get it back down. But if you get a car that has a fan heat exchanger and you got some fans on it, if you get it up to 150, 155, it's back down in the 130s, 120s within a couple minutes. And it's like, I don't really consider a car like that heat soaked, whereas a stock heat exchanger car that it's going to take me 30, 45 minutes to get all that energy out of, then I'd say that's heat soaked.
And by the way, we're having a sale on heat exchangers next week.
So
Kenny Grimm did let us know that it was a plug-in emissions test.
Okay.
To follow up. And then Slowpoke wants to know, is it best to keep an Auto 13 with a stock torque converter or go to an aftermarket torque converter to get a good 60 foot? He would like to have low 160 60 foots. Is that possible with a 79 millimeter pulley?
I got two different things from that. At first he said stock, and now he's saying with a 79 millimeter pulley.
I'm going back to look at his combination because it's Roush. It's the one with the Roush with the elbow.
Okay. A 79 millimeter pulley should be enough to propel you through the 60 foot pretty well without a torque converter. But if you wanted to run a 1.6 60 foot, you may need something like a 2C to get down to a 1.6 60 foot with only a 79 millimeter pulley.
You know what? A lot of times, I think what happens is 79's kind of like you're a little bit aggressive. So a lot of times when the weather cools down, you start making a lot more power everywhere, and those 60 foots become more attainable.
All of a sudden you do a wheelie and you're just not even expecting it.
You'll have a bad time. So yeah, race car.
James Manus wants to know, what does it take to make 500 real wheel horsepower on an 18 GT NA?
Manual or auto? That is the question.
I think we made 509 on American Muscle's manual. And I really tried to get them to do a ported 18 intake, and they didn't understand the porting voodoo magic. So,
but that car was long tubes E85 cold air.
Yeah.
500 wheel.
In good conditions, albeit because it was still like, it was back in like April or May, so up in Pennsylvania, I think they still had some cold 60-degree days. So, you know.
Lots of people saying hi. Can't get through all of them because I won't get to all of it. I.e. the car stops picking up power per degree of timing and they keep going.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that in the region that you're in, you're going to hit pre-ignition before the car just stops making power. Like PI is usually like part throttle, low RPM type stuff, as opposed to pre-ignition at 7,000 RPM. You have so much engine speed at that point that it's harder to get.
It's a little bit of a hard question to answer, so we have to read between the lines.
Like why? Kind of like trying to target the question to what we think you're meaning to say when you ask it.
I mean, E85 is very safe, and it's like any fuel. You get to diminishing returns as far as timing and ignition lead and stuff, and you just back it off.
Yeah.
I mean, the way we work on a lot of that stuff is like Joe was saying. All these combos are really, really similar. So. We've kind of been there, done that before.
And I have a few customers that must think that we don't know what we're talking about. So when we set timing at a certain level, they're like, no, I want more. It's like...
They read on the internet.
All right, well, fly. It's like, yeah, you can run more timing, but you're probably not making any more power there. So
you're talking about 10 more horsepower with that extra 2 degrees. So.
Yeah. It's like, how much safety am I losing with that 10 degrees? Or not 10 degrees, 2 degrees. That'd be crazy going 10 degrees. But I guess at the end of the day, if you know what you're doing with a Coyote and you've made some semblance of an attempt to map out where MBT is before, you know that, hey, on this setup, at this airflow and at this engine speed, I can run about this much advance, and that's about all it's going to do for power. And we tend to not go past that point of the max of what it's going to make for power at a certain point, unless someone tells us we're stupid and wants more timing. But, you know, whatever.
Joe, you're stupid. Give me more timing.
Exactly. Like, you're not giving me all the bicho.
Chad Dowd said that he saw the results that you posted on the phenolic spacers for the lower intake. They're very impressive and will definitely be buying them and installing them due to the results. Thank you for the info.
No problem.
Thank you, Chad, for chiming in. I got to call you and catch up on everything.
And if I recall correctly, Chad Dowd has a 11 to 14 GT, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for the guys that are watching, one thing I didn't talk about in there that I probably should have is that I don't know how hood clearance is on 15, 17 GTs with a VMP blower.
They're really
with
tight.
The phenolic spacers.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of close already. Throttle body, the back of the blower, and even the pulley and the very front of the nose drive. Yeah,
so I don't necessarily think it'll be a hood clearance issue on S550, but I don't know for a fact that it isn't. But as a heads up to the guys that are watching, we did add those phenolic spacers to the website. So if you wanted to order a set, I can hook you up with a link or just in the search bar, phenolic spacer.
James Manus updated us that 18 GT that he's wanting to make 500 on is a manual trans car.
Perfect.
Should be pretty simple then.
Get you there. Let's tune it up.
Beards and Cars is asking if he changes one size smaller pulley, does he need a retune?
Depends on how close you are to the threshold of being out of stuff, whether that be out of octane or out of fuel injector or out of fuel pump. I'd say globally between 85 and 79 millimeters on a Roush blower or a VMP blower, you're probably going to be okay. But anything below a 79, really consult us to make sure that everything in the setup is going to be there for you to be successful with that pulley.
And like with the way our Stage 2 kit's configured, 56s, booster, you can pretty much go from an 82 to a 79. You know, the fuel's there because we got the bigger injector and the booster.
A 93. 91's kind of, it works, but not ideal.
Dirty D is asking about timing versus IAT temp. Is there a ratio of timing reduction, like 1 degree of timing per 5 degrees of temp temp increase, 10 degrees of temp increase, how do those correlate?
Yes, there is something like that.
Should we go even deeper or just leave it at that? So there's a table that is, at least in Ford ECUs, there's a table that's load axis, load on one axis, the y-axis, and then RPM, or not RPM.
Temperature. Yeah. RPM.
RPM on the other.
Temperature multiplier.
Yeah. So we're brain fart.
Well, I'll just explain the gist of it.
Yeah.
At low load, idle, and part throttle, you're not really making any cylinder pressure. So even if your IAT is like 150,
it's not pulling out a metric ton of timing.
And a tip for other tuners out there: if you have a positive displacement blower car with big cams, they make high IATs. So just get rid of the retard function at idle and part throttle. They'll drive a lot better.
So there's essentially, that table is used as a multiplier for another table that is ACT versus timing advance retard, or advance if you want to do that.
Negative advance.
Yep.
Amount to pull out.
Or amount to add at the lower regions.
Oh yeah, you can add timing when you're colder too.
Yep.
So
like,
good idea, but it can be done.
A lot of people will use a 10 or 20% multiplier in the higher load, higher RPM regions, basically where people are at watt.
Where it matters.
Exactly. And then you have your ACT versus spark advance. So like we'll call out a relatively normal thing on a Coyote. 150 degree IAT, about 5 degrees of retard. Some guys are more or less aggressive than that. It just really depends on how your borderline knock tables are set up to call out base timing and whether or not you're adding timing in when it's colder. You see people zero that stuff out and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you crazy? What happens when the intercooler pump dies?
When the intercooler pump dies, because it will die one day.
Anthony Arredondo, that's the best I can do with that, has got our blower stage 2 kit. It's got long tubes on it, an X-pipe. It's got an 82 millimeter pulley on pump gas. He wants to know what is the average horsepower gain he can expect switching to a 79 millimeter pulley.
15 horsepower if you're not octane limited at the 79. I've seen some guys gain 20, but.
And then Jose Amador wants to know how much power can you make from an L&M intake only cam if you're full bolt on a manual Coyote.
FBO.
FBO.
I'm gonna say like 20 wheel.
I'd say 20 wheel on a full bolt on car. Similar to what guys got with Boss cams, just a little bit more. Back in the day. Ye old times.
Slowpoke wants to know if he goes with a JLT intake or PMAS. Will I have to be retuned or just bolt on and go?
Oh, please retune.
Do not bolt that on and go. There will be no going to that go.
It's a significant change to the size of the mass air housing, so the mass air transfer function has to be recalibrated.
Otherwise, it won't calculate load correctly, and therefore spark advance, and therefore fueling. And basically, everything in your ECU is based on temperature, engine speed, and that MAF.
Yeah, the MAF is very important.
Like if you had the big three and the calculations on the ECU, it's those three: temperature, RPM, and MAF.
James Maintenance is thanking you for the ported intake comment about the 500 real horsepower on the ATM GT. He said it brings things into perspective.
And I'll add something in there. We are stocking CNC ported 18 intake manifolds by Brett Barber. He is the only one CNC porting them because you can do a lot of damage with a Dremel. And he is CNCing them with a machine. We'll be doing a video about that, and like, just so people understand the difference in process. That and consistency. With a CNC, I'd imagine, is a bit better. Each port flows the same. Yeah. Imagine that.
It is 2:31. We still have a few more questions. So.
Run through them real quick. Yeah.
Beards and Cars says that he smells a small amount of exhaust fumes when running his AC. Any idea what could be coming from long tube, catless, catback, don't hear any exhaust leaks? Everything. It's probably a small leak at the collector or something. Long tubes.
There is something they sell at Napa. It's called Walker Acoustic Quiet. It is in a white tube. It is black goo. You put it on all your exhaust connections, and they seal.
It's tar.
Andrew Vincent is coming back to the converter. What's the best converter for a 6R80 in a car?
We work with FTI. It's pricey. It's pricey for anybody's converter. I mean, Circle D, we work with Circle D too. FTI is local to us. We've been using them a lot lately. But like we said, we also have a very loose purple PI converter out in the shop that we're selling for a customer that we can make you a good deal on and probably wake that thing up.
That, and I feel like people, again, ask for very specific questions about setups that there's not a specific answer to.
What's the best converter?
What's the best socket to use on a car? The one that fits.
San Constantino has a 17 Roush with 79 millimeter pulley, PMAS, cold air, 56-pound injectors, boost pump. It's tuned on 93 and 109 and wants to know what he should expect it to make. He says it's a 6-speed.
On a 79, on 93, it'll probably make 650 on a dyno jet. On a, like an SAE correction factor, it depends on how happy the car is at watt and whether or not the car is in cap protection during your dyno pull. On MS109, I'd have to look back at the file, but I'm probably being decently aggressive with it. It'd probably make right around 700 on a 79. If not closer, 680, 700 range.
Eric S. Says that he loves the show and wants to know if he should run his heat exchanger fans if he has ice in the reservoir.
Are you drag racing the car? Because like that changes the point in time in which you should turn your fans on. Justin has a lot of experience with icing down a car. When do you like to turn the fans on for a car that has a heat exchanger?
Rebecca, when do you turn on your heat exchanger?
My pump? I turn my pump when I'm doing my, right before I go do my burnout. I switch on, I have my hand on my switch and then I turn it on.
So you give it like 30 seconds before you make the pass to...
Yeah, about 30 seconds depending on how long it takes the other person to stage.
Right before your burnout. So
depends if they double walled me or not.
Like if you're going to the trouble of using ice, you got to have a switch because you just melt all of it by the time you get up the line if you don't have a switch. And then your engine's cooling system just puts all that heat right back into everything. So it's like playing that balancing act, which is another good time to have those phenolic spacers I found. Oh yes. Because then you can isolate your lower intake from your heads and keep the heads from putting heat into your lower intake. Yeah. Begs the question, should we get another spacer for the blower and completely isolate the intake manifold and the intercooler?
Robert Wyden asks if heat soak can cause a car to go into limp mode. He's curious because he's in Texas summer heat, it's 100-degree days, and the DA is 3,500 plus with some moderate humidity.
Typically, a car getting heat soaked won't cause failsafe unless it gets astronomically hot. Like if your engine cooling fan goes bad and you go over like 250, then you might get into like a, not an exotherm thing, I'm trying to think what they call it for like over temp protection mode. Cylinder disablement? Yeah. On the engine. Where they start doing fuel cut and stuff. Yeah, they start shutting off. Ford's got logic around 250 coolant temp. Start shutting off cylinders to use them as air pumps to cool the engine. Exactly. Fail-safe cooling mode. There we go. But I'm not familiar with a ACT-based fail-safe mode. I think it's only ECT-based. So, again, depends on how you're qualifying heat-soaked. But I would say globally, and unless under specific circumstances, it wouldn't be normal for a car to fail-safe when it gets hot, unless you're past that ECT threshold.
Josh Stoker says that he saw that we tuned the standing mile car, the 13 GT 500 that did 197. Do you remember what he was making power-wise? He'd like to know.
Is he talking about Justin Young's car? Or another car that did 197?
I don't know who did 197, but hey, you're looking at about, in a standing mile, if you gear the thing the right way, you only need about 850-ish maybe. 800, 850?
I'd say closer to that 850 mark to get to 197.
Like 190 and 200 is actually like a huge difference. A lot of it's gearing and tire size because you want to be in the power band at the top of the track.
And if the GT500 that you're referring to is more of like a pearlish color, that is Justin Young's car, the owner of Mod Motor Mustangs. And that car, although it was on our dyno, was tuned by Lund. Full disclosure.
And then Dirty D has one more question about E85. He says that he understands that we need to leave some room for safety with lower ethanol content. When you tune for E85, what ethanol percent are you really tuning for with that safety in mind?
When someone tells me they want to tune for E85, I make the ethanol content or the stoic point in the tune E85, which is like a 985, 989 stoic point. So that in and of itself builds a little bit of safety margin for lower ethanol contents, because you go down in ethanol content, you just get rich. You go really far down in ethanol content, you start losing some of the detonation resistance with ethanol blended fuels. What were you going to say?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of know what he's asking. I think I know what he's asking. It's not necessarily a sliding scale, and you add the combination and how badly it needs the octane of ethanol. And I mean, I don't know so much as we're not building in safety margin, we're not doing stupid shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, is 10 horsepower worth 2 degrees of timing?
Yeah, and that's again, is it worth putting more timing in if you've already passed MBT?
Yeah.
At that point, you're just generating more cylinder pressure. And it's like, why? So, I guess that's kind of it on that one.
We got 2 more while you're finishing it, so it's
2 more.
going to keep on going if you keep on going.
We'll answer them after the show.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to see me and Joe more often on Tuning Tuesday.
And see if my beard gets bigger, or
talk about stuff.
If my wife makes me shave it off. Tune in next week to see if Joe still has his beard.
Your turn.
See everybody next time.
Bye, guys.